非常谢谢我们的 Marian 跟 Rorian 两位精彩的分享，那让我们了解到这个计划的特殊性啊，然后以及就是说实际的工作方法以及案例哦。那接下来我们会有大概10分钟的一个
We will have about 10 minutes Q&A session. We would like to invite Professor Ying Baoning. She's the Professor of Graduate School, Institute of Arts Management and Cultural Policy, National Taiwan University of Arts. She will respond to your presentation, and we will invite you to have your response. So I want to give Professor Baoning a brief introduction, and she specializes in the gender research and the architectural research. She has several very significant publications, especially on gender and architecture, and how to put into practice in arts. Let's welcome Professor Baoning.
Thanks, both Marian and Lorian, for giving us such an inspiring speech. Yes, the future we believe female. 好，很高兴有机会听到两位讲者精彩的。
Thank you so much for your excellent sharing, and it's very inspiring. I would like to thank our organizers for your invitation. So I think I would like to respond to this amazing presentation. First of all, I think it's really inspiring because when we talk about gender equality or any gender issues, before it's always on theory or about our academic research, or some gender equality activism, but you actually put it in our museum work setting. Can anybody hear me clearly? It's all fine, yes. So secondly, because we actually put the gender issue on the museum setting. So when you mentioned that it's excellent for your project, you said there are 3 core topics, 3 pillars of your research. It's women makers, or women histories, and women in our institutional history. I think this is brilliant, and it's great to divide it into these 3 pillars and topics to make it all very clear. With this structure, not only it recalling about all the gender equality movements, but it actually evoking how can we move forward. Because when we actually give all the women in our history their identity, they are no longer in the background, they have become visible, I think it is very powerful itself. For museums, if they making female visible as a goal, I think it's significant. And especially your 3 pillars, I love them because women as makers, because museum is not only an institution that preserves our artifacts, it's actually a place that generates knowledge and spreading knowledge and generating new ideas. Once we return all the identities to the females in our history, and it will be able to inspire a lot of the art history researchers into new directions. As you mentioned, there are so many male masters. A lot of the female artists or female makers, they've been anonymous or invisible for years. So it's excellent to hear from your perspective. And thirdly, I would like to mention, as we all know, that museums is a public institution, not only to provide special exhibitions or permanent exhibitions, it's also an educational institution. So you mentioned that not only you provide the display of those artifacts, of those arts, you can have the new interpretation of all these paintings and all these artifacts, and then they will be able to raise public awareness and to fulfill its mission of education. So I'm really looking forward to, if we have time, to hear Marianne and Lorian sharing about maybe the transformation of your colleagues within the museum after embarking on this new project. I particularly like that you mentioned for your different departments within your museums, they start to be more aware of gender equality issues and to make women more visible. So I think it's excellent, especially women donors, because we rarely hear much about women donors. Usually it's about the guy, or they just say the couples. The women is usually invisible. So I think it's excellent. And I really love your sharing about your museum, about the transformation of the museum and the new direction in the future. So I think especially Generation Z, the video, some of our participants were saying the video is really touching because it's important to see the different perspectives about gender representation, gender equality from different generations. So we have seen the society has changed, evolved so much throughout time. So you mentioned that, okay, even though those gender equality movement has been going on for maybe, however, there's so much more we can do. I think it's excellent. So I would like to sum up here, and I will throw out 2 questions. An anonymous artist in New York in 1985. So since then, for about 20 years, they are more focused on female artists and gender equality issues. So I'm very curious, what's the initiative, what's the initiation to make your museum to come up with this project? What's the starting point for your museum to start this project? And the second question, as I mentioned, museum is not only a public institution, it is a workplace itself. So I'm very curious. You mentioned this project has been ongoing for about 3 years, and there are 30 colleagues participating in this project. So I'm quite curious. Throughout these 3 years, what are the reactions or response from different colleagues within your museums? Do they provide their full support, or they actually have different thoughts? So that's my 2 questions. Thank you so much. Professor Bao-Ning, for your sharing. It's very systematic, and for responding to the presentation by Marianne and Lorian. And Professor Bao-Ning raised 2 questions here. I hope you've noted them. So I would invite Marianne and Lorian to respond. So we got a few minutes here. If we can't finish our discussion here, we'll leave it to a Q&A session later. So thank you. So Marianne and Lorian. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this thoughtful reply. It's very, very nice to hear all those comments. And I think we are really on the same page. And it's very nice to see this connection, this worldwide connection for this topic. That's really touching. So how we started? We started in 2020 by a question of a Dutch journalist. And this Dutch journalist asked us how many women artists we did have in the collection. And we couldn't reply on that. And we were not the only one, of course. And we are a very big museum. And as we already told, we are not just a museum of painting, so it's difficult to count them, and it's also not very reasonable to count them because then you get very different numbers. But it was a good question, and we really felt the urge to really do something about it. So then our former colleague Jenny Reinhardt, curator of 19th century, started a project together with one of our directors, Hendrikje, which is one of the female directors we had at the time. And they thought, let's make it a big project within the museum. Let's ask ourselves these questions before other journalists can ask them. And of course, it's not that because journalists ask them, that's not the only reason why we started, of course, but it was like a catalysator, kind of. So then we started, and we always thought that research was the main topic. So we always started with the curators, just like ourselves. We started with doing research, but we also felt immediately that we can do the research, but we are working in this big museum, which has this production chain, so to say. If you want products, you need all the departments to be involved. So if we're doing research and there's nothing interested in press, in marketing, in education department, we have not a case. So then we asked from each department, one person, a person which felt the same urge as us, so to say, to be part of the team. And all the heads of all the departments were very willing. So there was this urge felt within the museum for a lot of people, I think. So the funny thing is now all these departments, all these persons in these departments, they act as our ambassadors and a bit as our spies, so to say. So if there's something happening within the marketing or within the education department, we always hear it, so we can always pinpoint it, we can always respond on it. So that's really helpful. And I think that in the Netherlands, at the moment, we feel all very much attached to women issues. At the moment, the world is changing. We really see that. 5 years ago, it was in the Netherlands, we felt that we had really support. We all felt that we had to do something about the lack of women visibility. But I think now the world is a bit more harsh at the moment in Western Europe and America as well. So we are shifting towards a more difficult, I think, environment. So and therefore we in the museum, we feel even more the urge to respond on this and keep the work we started. I don't know, do you have any edit?
No, that's I totally agree. And I think as to like the social movements in the 80s with the Guerrilla Girls and everything, that of course did have an impact here, but more in academia, and somehow it didn't really siphon through into the museum walls. And 5 years ago, we really realized that and thought, okay, now is the time to change, and we don't want to be another wave. We want to be here permanently.
Yeah.
So that's really what, the catalyzer.
Yeah. And I think also the change, and that's what we learned from the Guerrilla Girls, it's very important to us to be very inclusive. And what we mean by inclusive is going through all the centuries, going not only responding on women artists, but also women in society, women in institutions, just our pillars, so to say. And we think that helps making us permanent. Yeah.
Thank you. If we have time later, we will continue in the Q&A session. So we would like to say a big thank you to Marianne and Orion. Thank you so much for your sharing. Okay, we will have a 30-second break to be able to put the next speaker on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We will now proceed with the next keynote presentation. Daddy and Vivian, please go ahead and share your slides as I give a brief introduction to your background. Is now a visiting assistant professor in in the Department of Media Arts and Culture in Occidental College in California. She's a media artist and the co-founder of Voices of Women Media. Since 2004, she has organized participatory media workshops and has extensive experience in engaging and empowering women's communities across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the United States. Today, she will talk about how, from voice to video, participatory media can be used as a method for community engagement. Before we proceed, may I remind members of the audience that if you wish to listen to the English interpretation, please click on an icon at the bottom left corner of the interface, and from the drop-down menu, select English or Chinese. There's a slider bar that you can use to adjust whether it's the interpreter or the speaker on the floor that you want to hear more. Now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Vivian.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for this lovely invitation to share my work with you all. A big thank you to the organizers for putting this incredible event on. And thank you for the previous speakers for sharing their stories, as well as sharing their amazing work that they're doing to fight for gender equality within cultural institutions. I am based in Los Angeles, California at Occidental College, but currently I'm on sabbatical and living and working in Asia. I'm an visiting assistant professor at the School of Creative Media at the City University of Hong Kong. So I've been based in Asia for the past month and very excited to be back. Today, I will give a talk, as mentioned, from voice to video participatory media as a method for community engagement. And today I will introduce a selection of our projects from Voices of Women Media and how our participatory arts-based methodologies can contribute to gender equality through media education and through community engagement. It was really great to hear from Marianne and Loreen for their talk about the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, because our organizational history was also born in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, where I co-founded Voices of Women Media back in 2007 with my partner Pooja Pant. We met in Amsterdam and we found ourselves very curious to the communities of migrant women and women of color around us. And we had a shared experience being recent migrants to the Netherlands ourselves. And it was through this curiosity that we developed an idea just to find out more about who these women were. And so we conceived this self-portrait video workshop with undocumented women living in a transitional housing shelter. That was our very first project. And it was during our time in the Netherlands that we established the organization, and through this, we were able to work with a variety of communities, including migrant sex workers, first-generation immigrant daughters, and survivors of human trafficking. What you see pictured is a self-portrait collage from one of our earlier projects with migrant sex workers, and the project was called A Day in Our Life, and we did that in 2010 and 2012, partnering with health and support organizations that worked in the red light district. Currently, our office is based out of Kathmandu, Nepal, where Pooja Pant is the executive director. And I'm kind of roaming the world doing projects, firstly in Hong Kong and Taiwan, which I'll talk about soon, and Indonesia, to explore especially topics of women's migration. And through this kind of research, we found that it was very much related to the emotional and reproductive labor industries. We found that visualizing and the self-authoring of women's stories are rooted in the feminist slogan, "The personal is political," and it recognizes the value of the individual story and that each person's experience can speak on and represent larger issues reflected in society. Many of the personal problems and issues women experience in their lives are the results of systematic oppression And in each country we work in, there are very different forms of what this oppression is. And by contributing each personal story, one can participate in changing or trying to change the social norms and reduce any stigmas had about their profession or their migration status, and use media making to resist and question these established norms. I'm so happy to share a project I did in Taipei in 2012, especially to this audience here. It's called With Love from Taiwan, and it was a series of multimedia workshops for foreign spouses that have married into Taiwanese families or are considered new immigrants to Taiwan. I partnered with several cultural institutions, the Bamboo Curtain Studio that housed me for an artist residency, so I lived in Taipei for a month. And my organizational partner was the Taipei New Immigrants Hall that gave me venue and space and did outreach into the community to generate interest for participants. I ended up working with 5 foreign spouses who very generously, openly shared stories of their lives of immigrating to Taiwan. And besides the process of migration and of leaving, I wanted them to discuss the themes of arriving and what they found there. So they shared about starting a new life, learning a new language, having family, gaining new family members, and most importantly, becoming adjusted to Taiwanese cuisine. And through this workshop, they visualized this new arrival through very mundane events of their daily lives. A lot of this took form, as you see with the titling from my lovely translator, about the form of a video letter. So sending these medias to their family abroad. So we work with multimodalities of media, and this series particularly began with participants collecting images for a self-portrait, just like the collage I showed for A Day in Her Life in Amsterdam. And it's kind of through this tiered process that we're, generating comfort with, sharing stories with media. And the screen you see here is an excerpt from a radio show, a transcript. And then after the radio show, we end with a video, which is kind of the most intense process, and that's written, directed, and edited by the participant. For the radio show in particular, I really like this because we get to know participants on a very intimate level. They interview each other, and they can share, stories of migration, but more so they share music. And they bring in music that was significant to them or that creates a sense of nostalgia or a longing for home. And what we found in this is that there was definitely a commonality of the shared experience of migration, very much like what Pooja and I experienced. And they're able to become active agents in the storytelling process, and they also become directors. They become directors in this process. And what's so important about this is that so often migration stories are lost, are not recorded, and are forgotten. So it was a really nice occasion to be able to work in Taiwan. So this method, participatory media and its production, it seems quite involved. We're introducing media technology as well as narrative storytelling skills to a community that might not have access to this, with the aim for self-representation, change in policy, and social reform. It's a big ask. The framework is a knowledge exchange between media makers, community members, and organizational partners. Participatory media can include a variety of narrative devices such as digital storytelling, photo voice, participatory video, cell films, or like mobile making films, and other arts-based approaches such as collage or writing. I have to emphasize it's very much process-based and not product-based. We tell participants from the beginning, you can decide what you are willing or not willing to contribute. So informed consent is very important to us, and sometimes we have projects where none of the media gets shown. Because of this, we consider our participants the center of the production, and the community is consulted and engaged in the entire creative process. So working together is the key thing. Any of you who have made media, who have made films, know it's not just the director that makes the film and that it takes a small team to make something happen. We try to offer access and opportunities to different various levels of media technology. So sometimes we have big cameras, sometimes we have some small cameras, sometimes they only have cell phones to use. And so although we introduce a variety of these technological tools in the workshop process, we really emphasize on how to craft these personal narratives. And through working together, because the women often have a shared experience or different experience, they're able to really kind of pitch in their stories and really feel like wanting to contribute their story to this process. So pictured here are scenes from the Informal Women Workers Project in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And this was in partnership with the Institute for Women's Empowerment that's based out of Jakarta. And here we saw many issues of internal migrants moving from rural areas to cities for work. So we discussed kind of internal migration amongst different communities of women laborers. So those that worked in the market, those that worked at home, those that were domestic workers. And here they were able to learn about each other's experience of migration as well as the different forms of labor. The participatory process is very relational. It involves memory work. It can be autoethnographic. It involves self-reflection, recollection, and sometimes recontextualization. So sometimes it can be traumatic because participants want to share something that is very personal to them about their journeys, about something that they really want to work towards to kind of heal from. And our aim is to help facilitate these voices and stories from these communities, especially because they might not have access or ability to tell these stories, and to make it kind of tangible form through this very dynamic and very collaborative process. So I'm not going to show this video, but an ongoing theme was about the choice in an agency that the women were engaging with. So being a domestic worker is not my destiny, but my choice. And through this project, we realized that a lot of the women workers were very much proud and had ownership of their professions. And so I'm going to show a very short 1-minute video called 70 kg equals 2000 rupiah by Enda Winarti. And this was self-shot by Enda and her peers that worked in their fellow market workers. And as I said, she wanted to display her strength as a breadwinner of the household and that she was very much proud of her position. This was her very first experience working with media technology and computers. Okay, so moving on to actually last year, and it's been a great pleasure being situated at Occidental College in Los Angeles, because through my institution, I've been able to kind of partner and bring in college students to learn about the process. So I teach a class called Media Activism through Participatory Video. And after a few years, I've been able to now start creating participatory video projects bringing in students to these places. And so in 2024, I brought 4 students to Kathmandu, Nepal to work with Voices of Women Media. And what you see is a behind the scenes still from Camera Rolling, an anthology from young women in Nepal. It was a participatory video workshop held in Kathmandu, and it engaged 13 young women from government high school to learn the tools of filmmaking, to write, direct, and edit, a collective anthology for what it means for them to be navigating through a very patriarchal society. Nepal currently has gone through a lot of political turmoil. So I think it's, really speaks to, the desire for this generation to kind of make their mark. This workshop was part of a longer educational intensive called Techno Hub. And so the girls have been going to Voices of Women Media for over a year as a media literacy program. And it's in partnership with the neighborhood government schools. And we've been doing this project for over 5 or 6 years. And so our Nepal office is located in the Basantapur district of Kathmandu. We have the first feminist library there, and it's a great community space for people to come and hang out and read books, especially from a gendered lens. Val Media in Nepal is very much respected by the community because of their outreach, because they provide space for the youth and for women. And so it was not difficult for us to gain permission for young women to participate in a media project. Oops, that just automatically switched, sorry. The result of this media workshop is an anthology of short videos, and it's divided into 3 chapters. The first is Fighting Against, about the daily experience of sexual discrimination and the prevalence of violence against girls and women. The second chapter, Fed Up, are videos about how fed up the girls are with harassment in real life and online. And the third chapter, Self-Love, are videos about how they vow to protect each other in finding safety, joy, and freedom. And I would love to share with you one of these videos called Those Eyes, which is a literal, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of memory work and recreation and recontextualization of these young women's stories. And so this is a literal retelling to the audience of how one's physical space is threatened in a public setting. Okay, so we try to end all of our media workshops with a private semi-public screening for friends and family and community members, but also Val Nepal is really adamant about making the Techno Hub participants organize and host screenings in their communities directly. And so what you see on screen are some comments from some of these public screenings that the girls held when they shared their film. One says, "I feel like this was my film. I know how unsafe it feels to go outside. Boys bullies online. It is so frustrating." So the young women also participate in question and answer, and it's always really a great project for their peers to kind of see and witness their ability to share these stories. And especially with the Techno Hub initiative, we want these young women to understand why learning technology is a feminist issue as well, and that making technology accessible to the most marginalized young girls in an urban setting where oftentimes technology is relegated to the males in the household, that having and learning this is not a scary thing, and that especially with the work of Voices of Women Media, we work from ages 12 to 80, right? So trying to demystify and just give the foundations of storytelling. And so, as I mentioned before, the knowledge exchange, so these kinds of projects demonstrates an exchange between all these different community members. The girls gain media literacy, technical skills, they gain friends, and then they are given a space on which to explore and create and apply these skills. And in turn, Valmedia is able to understand the issues that are impacting this community, to engage this community, and then to use this media to push to create social change that, why VOW is based in Nepal right now, to especially challenge the patriarchal structures that are keeping the young woman kind of suppressed. But also media such as this can create empathy, understanding, and definitely provide perspective. Okay, so jumping from Nepal to Los Angeles, I wanted to talk a little bit about a few projects where I was able to do some community engagement through cultural institutions, and in particular with a museum. And I worked with Dr. Jenny Lin from the University of Southern California and their Pacific Asia Museum to conduct a series of participatory video workshops for their audience and their public. And this was in connection to current exhibitions and public programming. So it's kind of like satellite events to support the larger themes that were connected to the exhibitions. Our first event was called Taipei Night, and we got to screen With Love from Taiwan to a packed, sold-out audience, and they absolutely loved this project. And after the film screening, I ran a really intense, crazy 1-minute video workshop that was like a 1 hour, and there was like 50 people that participated. And so, asking them to respond to the themes of migration. And then they just went out and made them and uploaded them. And then we had a screening that night. The second project, Dr. Jenny Lin curated an exhibition called Another Beautiful Country, and she asked me to create a film project, and I called it the Joy Luck Mom Club, about my mother's own migration. And in connection to that, I created a longer kind of afternoon participatory video project for the audience members to kind of create their own Joy Luck Mom Club moments to contribute to like the larger discussion on motherhood and migration. So I wanted to share that this is what was shared to the audience, and this is how we got participants. And so the prompts included share your own hidden stories of women's migration by sharing a 1-minute video letter or dedication to your mother or another significant relative. Bring in a physical item of relevance that relates to an untold narrative of migration. Again, a lot of these stories kind of just come in whispers, and so we want to make sure that these stories get kind of put down into a tangible form. A lot of participants responded to this: reflect on a photograph of your choosing, and strangers came with their family photographs and then ended up talking through all of their the journeys of their parents. Think of your immigrant mother. What would you like to tell us about her? Tell a memory, story, or an anecdote passed down to you. Send a video letter, interview a partner. So again, very, very wide range of prompts, but generated a beautiful response from, from a public that I only met that day. And very, in contrast to the other projects that I showed you, where I'm working with the communities for weeks or months at a time. So although we're not given the same amount of resources or time, the process is still very much the same, although intense. And everyone is surprisingly candid, very honest. And the museum-going audience comes from very diverse backgrounds, but their intention was all the same: to learn, experience, and share together. And I found that primarily we worked with a lot of women, because maybe migration and the themes of motherhood were more gender focused, leaning towards that, and that they had a personal connection to the themes of motherhood and more personal stories that they wanted to capture and share by participating in these workshops. That being said, these public workshops are, of course, open to all genders. And although it's called Voices of Women in Media, I have done projects with young men, and men are definitely included in the process as much as they want to be. But I wanted to talk briefly about this project that just happened this summer, where it was a primarily community of men, and I felt like it was still very much a feminist issue. So again, with support of working with my college, I was able to create a multi-generational project, bringing in students to assist me in running a participatory video workshop. In this case, it was a 10-week-long workshop with a community, a really amazing community called API Rise, Asian Pacific Islander Reentry through Inclusion, Support, and Empowerment. And I received support from a grant from Asian Network Mellon Asian American and Pacific Islander Voices and Stories program. Okay, that was a mouthful. API Rise, the organization, serves and supports the formerly incarcerated and systems impacted Asian Pacific Islanders. So many of the community were being just released or on probation from prison. And although primarily male, we did have several female members from this group. Many are Southeast Asian refugees, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Many are undocumented and have precarious migration status. Also, I wanted to add on why I considered this a feminist project is that when a male member of the family is incarcerated, then the bulk of keeping the family together, ends up in the hands of the female relatives, the wives left at home. And so trying to understand, the whole picture in regards to incarceration, especially for this community. API Rise as an organization aims to build community and offer support to this group into reintegrating back into society. So offering very simple things like how to go get your license renewed, how to, get access to public transportation. And during this 10-week, very intensive project, the participants learned how to share their own stories, and like everyone else, writing, directing, and editing their projects while hopefully building meaningful and long-term connections. This project was different in that we only focused on the video as compared to the other projects that you saw with in Nepal and in Taiwan and in Amsterdam, where the participants went through kind of this tier of photography, radio, collage, or other, writing, and then we ended it with video. This group only got the video. We are still working together to this day, and I wanted to share, this just finished. I wanted to share just a still from Drop and Give Me Props, one of the few projects made from a woman in this project, and her kind of, her message in the story was that she wanted to, showcase how she was still a badass, and that this is, her daily routine is that she would go on walks, and every time she turned a corner, she would drop to the ground and do 20 push-ups. And she says never once did anyone kind of stop and ask her, hey, are you okay? Like, everything all right? Because, seeing an elderly woman drop to the ground should be jarring and kind of should generate some kindness. But she said there was one time when a young man kind of gave her a thumbs up. And this was the story that she wanted to tell. We were able to, again, like recreate these stories and kind of create a positive spin or create alternative endings to this. In response to making this video, we did kind of exit interviews with the directors. She said, she really loved about learning the new technology. She gained respect for filmmakers. She was like, this was only one itty bitty tiny 1 minute, but it took us so many people and so many hours to create this 1 minute. And that it was a very much enjoyable experience to have teamwork when you've been put away for so long, and learning to be creative during such an experience of incarceration. Pictured is our kind of final screening and celebration. I forgot to mention that through all of these projects, there is a lot of eating involved, and these kind of downtime, informal moments are, coffee time, tea time, meal time, especially with the Taiwan and Nepal projects, as well as that, you're together for very intense amount of hours during out the day, but when you're eating together, you find the moments of connection, and then you're able to build trust and create a space where you can be creative. And to wrap up, I wanted to kind of emphasize again that, the process of these projects is very much important, and the experience that our participants go through in becoming directors and becoming creators and learning how to make, and also being proud and to own the work and to share it to their community is very important. And overall, I feel that, I've been working with participatory methodologies now for about 20 years, and they can very much humanize communities that we're afraid of, that we don't know about. It can reduce kind of negative impacts of stereotypes or long-held stigmas about those communities, and especially in relation to issues of migration and gender rights, and now to kind of the formerly incarcerated. Being able to see firsthand what these communities want to share and put out there is really important. Regarding this methodology, there's strong potential to promote and encourage social change, and to contribute these self-authored narratives to larger discussions that are going on. And so I know with Voices of Women Media, we use these medias to, go into and try to speak to policymakers, to speak to schools about programming. And for myself, we're using these to screen to the communities and to bring to other organizations and to bring into educational institutions as well. So that being said, I feel like this can really challenge power dynamics, especially when it comes to accessibility with filmmaking and media technology. It is a very intensive process, but the reactions and responses from the participants in going through this process, it's almost like a boot camp of sorts. Some say it is therapeutic, although we're not licensed, but the act of writing, creating, directing is very therapeutic. Some say it is healing. When I ask, especially when projects are relating to memory or memory, recollection, many have said that being able to look deep and be able to write and create a project about this process really contributes to their healing, and that it's just so impactful for them to be able to share their perspective. So that's my work in a nutshell. I'm gonna stop sharing.